My 29M parents, 60F/61M, want me to reach out to my no-contact sister, 27S, and it blew up yesterday. Yesterday, I, 29M met my parents, 60F/61M for a hike with my wife, 28F As we were hiking, my dad and I got a bit ahead of my mom and wife, and he brought up a topic we've been circling for a few weeks. They want me to reach out to my estranged sister for them. My sister, 27S has been estranged from our family for over a year. My sister has suffered from severe depression since we were teenagers. My parents not having any previous experience with depression did, in my opinion, the best they could. They took her to therapy, tried antidepressants, and my mom was especially always a listening ear. Were they perfect? Definitely not. But they made an conscious effort to help her get to a better place. Since her teenage years their relationship has always been rocky. Personally, it wasn't until I went to college and had a suicidal roommate that I really began to develop a true understanding/empathy toward mental illness. When we were kids my sister could be very aggressive and cruel towards me, so I began distancing myself as we got older. Our relationship was never great, but was really bad throughout middle/high school. It wasn't until we had both graduated college that we really started talking and attempting to foster a relationship. Our early adult relationship went in ebbs and flows of talking. To be frank, it's always been a bit of walking on eggshells with her. We'd be having a pleasant conversation, but after 15 minutes it'd go sour really quick. I was never sure what I could say or talk about with her, even though I'd try to establish triggers and topics we should avoid. A few years ago she started opening up to me about our childhood and wanted me to confirm that our parents were abusive people. I told her I couldn't agree with that experience and that I had a great relationship with mom and dad. I told her though that I understand we may have had different experiences of the same situations and I would listen to her and be there to talk if she need. For the next few years, we'd have the occasional conversation about, do you think mom and dad are abusive now? What about this situation? It all exploded after a family vacation to my uncle's ranch house. We all agreed to bring food, had rented a boat at a nearby lake, etc. She didn't bring food, slept in extremely late every day and make us late to scheduled activities, was very cruel to her boyfriend and his family in front of us, and picked fights with almost everyone in attendance. After we all went home my mom called her and let her know that her behavior was very frustrating for all of us and to see what her deal was. You can guess how that conversation went. My sister called me in tears, begging me to admit that they were abusive and terrible parents. I told her again that I couldn't agree with, but respect her emotions/her different experiences and was there for her to talk/listen it out. We went back and forth for a while, but eventually I suggested that she just take a breather and give herself some time to cool off and heal. Maybe a month or two of minimal or no contact with them to figure out a plan and talk with them. She said she'd sleep on it. The next day I get a text that she doesn't want to talk with me anymore and she regrets our conversation. My parents got something similar. Over the course of the last year-ish I've had to deal with daily and weekly phone calls about her with my parents. I finally got my parents to go therapy, thank God, and I felt everything was moving in the right direction. While I wish I could be there for my sister in a more active way, without having to condemn my parents, I really hope this time for her has been healing and that she's finding a healthier way to live, even if it doesn't include us. So back to the hike. My dad had been hinting that he wants me to try and contact her for a few weeks, but he thought our marsh hike would be the appropriate time to bring it up. I tell him that I don't think it's a good idea to reach out and force a conversation. We know from two older cousins of mine that my sister is still alive and doing her own thing. He starts getting a bit loud and talking over me, and I ask him to slow down and listen to me for a minute. I say, she asked us to not contact her, so I want to respect her wishes, and that if she does decide she wants to talk with us I want her to feel like she can trust me. Part of that trust in my opinion is respecting her wishes. So I say I won't do it. My dad lost it like I've never seen him act before. I was completely in shock. He started saying we're $% ring dying here and you won't help us. I guess he forgot about the last year. I'd do anything for family and you won't try to talk to her for 60 seconds for us, etc. Told him again I don't think it's the right thing to do. I also said what's the plan if she answers the phone? Do I tell her that we miss her and want to talk? Are you ready to apologize to her? Will you fight her and drive her father away? What's the plan? Of course, he didn't have any answers to these questions and continued to rant. I told him that I couldn't talk to him while he was like this, and if he wanted to talk like adults he needed to calm down. I want to help them get through this, but this isn't helpful for us or her. Started back down the trail toward the parking lot and bumped into my wife and mother. My mother went to console my dad and my wife and I went a separate way and talked. We all met in the parking lot at the end and he gave me a half apology / continued talking about it. Tears were shed, more angry comments were said, and eventually I just stopped talking, so we all left. My parents have both since texted me apologies and that they feel sick about what happened and to contact them back. It's the first real fight I've ever really had with them, so I'm taking some time to meditate on the situation and come back with a clear head. I know they're in deep pain and at the end of their rope with this, but it doesn't excuse my dad's behavior toward me. I can forgive them because I know I have no understanding of the pain of losing a child, but I have to make sure that if I continue to be there for them I'm not treated poorly or breaking my sister's boundaries. How can I /29M help my parents? 60F/61M navigate having an estranged child, 27F and get them the help they need before our relationship hits a hard place. How can I take care of myself in this situation better? Too long didn't read. I, 29M, have an estranged sister, 27F There is a lot of history and difficult issues. My parents, 60F/61M want me to contact her for them, but I said no because I want to respect her wishes. My dad blew up at me and I'm trying to understand how to proceed with our relationship / family troubles. Edit, since I've gotten a few messages about this I want to clarify, I've never told my sister that her feelings of abusive are invalid. I've shared with her that I respect what she has shared with me, but I can't validate experiences for her since I don't share the same shared experience of abuse from our parents. I've told her I don't feel like I was abused and I don't see our parents as abusive, but respect that she has a different experience and won't attempt to convince her otherwise. Edit, within the edit, I also can't validate for my parents that they weren't abusive parents. They weren't to me, but they were to my sister. There is no right answer, just what they're willing to choose to accept and acknowledge for themselves. I can't be the bridge for my sister's abuse or my parents' non-abuse. That is journey they can only discover between the three of them and I need to get out. Abuse can take a lot of different faces, and because a person doesn't feel abused doesn't mean it didn't happen to someone else. I do think abuse and a person being an abuser is a very nuanced thing and it varies greatly between people's individual experiences. I don't consider my parents intentionally abusive people, but people who are capable of committing abusive acts. Whereas my sister experienced things that would make them intentional abusers to her. In a similar vein, my sister is the same. She abused me as a kid, maybe out of anger, maybe out of spite, maybe because she was a struggling kid who just needed to lash out. I personally don't consider her my abuser, at least not anymore now that I've healed and grown. I pity her and know she has struggled for a long time. I know I've probably been a bully or abuser to a different person at least once, if not more than once in my life. We all abuse each other in society because we've all been abused and spread our anger, pain, frustration on each other in known and unknown ways. I think the label of abuser and the quick calls to abandon people because of a situation can be rash. Obviously it depends on the severity of the situation and those involved. I'm not going to cut my parents off, but I do need to establish stronger boundaries with them so I'm not in the middle of this situation any longer. I need to continue to support my sister by not contacting her and letting her find her own healing process and peace, even if it means I never talk with her again. Finally, I do want to say thank you to everyone who has commented, shared their personal story, and challenged my comments/post. This is a much more intimate/detailed situation than a single Reddit post can solve and deal with. I appreciate the kind words, the tough words, and everything in between. It's a lot to process and has helped me formulate some of my thoughts and given me new questions to ask myself. While I have this mini stage, I'll just say this: be good, be patient, be kind to one another. We all can be better to one another if we stay aware and allow ourselves to accept change in front of us. I feel sad for Op that a lot of people are poking holes in his life story when he's the one who has been going to therapy and been keeping really level-headed this whole discussion. Stick to what you know to be true, since this has been what you have reflected, meditated, and gone to therapy for. You're doing a great job keeping those boundaries. Parents can be abusive even though they only want what's best for the child, and although we should hold them responsible for that, I really believe that most parents aren't intentional with abuse. From personal experience, my mom is emotionally, verbally, and physically abusive, but I see all of that stems from my grandmother and her mother. In the end, they are all just victims of the same vicious cycle, and I think it's important to recognize that. I respect how you also look at the intent of your parents, because we are all just human. We can be their whole sun and stars but still be abused because they were taught tough love. Think about your family background, but if parents grew up poor and don't want their children to experience the same hardships as they did, most tend to lose sight of what matters to the kid to make sure they succeed. You don't need to help patch things up between your sister and parents, and I also believe that it is best for everyone to let go of her and respect her decision. What I think should need patching up is your own mental health as well as your parents. I hope they are consistent with therapy. I can't be the only one thinking that your sister is narcissistic. She had you walking on eggshells when you were young and everyone else at the family vacation. This is actually abusive behavior from her. In all of the experiences you shared, it's more like your parents want to please her than them being abusive. Now, the way your parents treated you wasn't okay. If your parents manipulated your sister like they tried to manipulate you, then yes, that was not okay either. But here's the thing. Your sister is a grown woman who can decide who she wants in her life, even if she's a narcissist, unstable, or whatever. You're doing the right thing by respecting her no-contact wishes. If your parents want to reach out to her, they can do that themselves. They shouldn't use you like that. That was another thing my therapist had mentioned to me, that she may just have narcissistic tendencies. I do think my parents walked on eggshells for years, especially after she moved out, to please her so she'd stay in their lives specifically. She's a very difficult person to maintain a relationship with. She doesn't have any really close friends, but she has a lot of previous friends who don't talk with her anymore. Frown. Do you have any examples of what she said was abusive? Bits and pieces, but a lot of it was her trying to get me to agree that I saw our parents as abusive too. Some of the things she mentioned was them not understanding her depression and the way they treated her boyfriends. I may have missed it, but did your sister ever mention what they did to her that was abusive? It sounds like you've been pretty introspective about whether or not your parents were abusive, so I think it's fair to put that aside for now. I think you're doing a great job. You're respecting the boundaries your sister set, and you're setting your own boundaries with your parents. I would go further and tell your parents not only will you not contact your sister, but also that she is not a topic of conversation for the three of you to have at all anymore. You can't know what their relationship felt like to the people in it, and so this is really between your sister and your parents, and it's not fair for them to try to get you to intervene or validate their feelings that they did nothing wrong. My 30M friends went on a trip without inviting me, after I was part of the initial conversation to take the trip. Before quarantine, a friend and I were talking about how much we wanted to visit a specific city. Almost everyone in our town knows people, so it's often where people go on trips, and made those we should go soon kind of plans you make when you have commitments with unclear end dates. At the start of quarantine we kept talking about going, and ideas of things to do when we go after quarantine. Nothing close to set in stone. Near the beginning of quarantine, a member of my immediate family got diagnosed with a serious, life-threatening illness. I've always been prone to depression, but at first I was doing well. Still seeing friends as much as allowed, still keeping up with messaging people. As time went on, the realities of the illness started to really strike home, as well as the idea that I may never actually see them again. Their immune system was shot and it's risky enough in a non-pandemic. My mood got progressively worse, leading to incredible fatigue. But I also started to intentionally socially isolate it for if they felt well enough to see each other, outside, from a distance of course. The family member is doing much better, and we got to talk in person recently as well. Not part of the story but something I've been ecstatic about. At some point during quarantine the aforementioned friend and I were talking with another group of friends who had gone on a camping trip. And several of us mentioned wanting to get an Airbnb for a night or two in a small town nearby for fun. Little of that was mentioned again. A few days ago we were in a chat with a group of friends, when one friend says, "When are you guys getting back?" Friends mention a day, and I'm clearly uncomfortable because this is something I know nothing about. It turns out a small group of friends got an Airbnb and are going for a couple of nights. I just feel crushed. It was something I seem to have been intentionally not told about. An hour or two passes with me not messaging anything, literally thinking I may just never talk to them again because what the hell do I say now? Before I message the friend I'm closest with, "How long has there been actual plans?" Within an hour she replies, "There was a trip planned a couple weeks ago to the first city that got cancelled because of increased COVID fears. They planned it when I was first starting to really socially distance because the family member's surgery date was fast approaching. The trip they went on was spontaneous and last minute, booked the night before we talked. She said she didn't want to tell me because they didn't want to ask if I wanted to come to a high COVID area, and this most recent trip they didn't think it was appropriate. On the one hand, I understand. The camping trip I mentioned earlier was one I missed out on because my family member was admitted into the hospital and I decided I didn't want to be unreachable for a week, so I stayed home. But that was a choice I made, one I had the option to make. And yes, they knew I'd been isolating, but they also knew I got to see my family member in person and their surgery was done. I think one of the worst parts, though, is that one of my biggest, self-related, fears about this whole thing was when I finally got to start living a normal life again, my friends would think I've been a bad friend and not want to talk to me, or even worse have just stopped considering me. Two of the people on the trip are two of very few people I've told what's going on. No one on the trip but the first friend mentioned was there when the Airbnb idea was first brought up. The first friend I've specifically mentioned how hard it's been because I'm worried people will be mad with me for being a bad friend. I don't really know what to do. I understand where they were coming from, but maybe that's just me being worried about losing friends and making concessions. How do I go back to normal knowing I was intentionally left out of plans? I don't want to cut the friend out of my life, because I genuinely like them. I know they worry and are anxious about being rude or mean or doing the wrong thing to friends, but how can I be part of a friend group where I now can't trust that I haven't been intentionally left out of anything? I haven't even replied to the explanation because of how close to my dread the situation hit, and I was worried when I started typing I'd write a message that essentially said goodbye, because I don't want that to happen. But I don't know what to even say at this point. Too long didn't read, been socially isolating for several weeks while everything has been reopening so I could see a family member in person for the first time in 7 months before they went into hospital for an incredibly risky surgery. Found out several friends had planned a couple of trips and went on one without asking me. My 26F boyfriend, 29M, bought a ring. How to stop myself from freaking out, in a good way. So my boyfriend sat me down and had me pick out some different diamonds for me to look at. We had done this before and he had moved it to his cart but had not acted on it, resulting in the ring being sold. So when I picked one and he moved it to the cart with the band I picked out, he said, "Okay, so this one will probably get sold too and we'll have to do this again." I laughed because I figured it was true. Well, turns out he bought it, lol. He was sitting at his laptop doing work when I came up to hug him from behind and chit chat. I noticed the ring company on his email and your purchase with and saw another email on top of that saying he had had a conversation with a rep from the company, one of those rate your convo with. So I think it's safe to say he bought a ring. I don't think he's planning on proposing this year. We talked about it and he had made a joke about pushing the proposal from the spring 2021 to fall 2021 when we were messing around with each other. So maybe it'll still be spring, but I also don't know how long people just hold on to rings for, so maybe it'll be sooner. Anyway, how do I stop myself from spending each outing or trip or whatever as a potential proposal? I don't want to disappoint myself each time it doesn't happen or hype myself up in any way. Mostly because I want to be surprised. Wish he was better at hiding his email lol. TL, doctor, saw over boyfriend's shoulder he purchased a ring. How to basically forget about it and not be expectant at every opportunity to propose so that I'm surprised and not disappointed. Edit, I want to say thank you so much to everyone who responded and those who left awards. I'm happy I can share my happiness with others. I got some really great advice. I'm going to look into an engraved watch. I'm also going to just enjoy this time leading up to a proposal, whether it's tomorrow or a year from now. Like a lot of you said, wedding planning is stressful, so the lead up is one of the fun parts. Thanks. Smile.
You.